Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to June's Virtual Thursday. And we are going to be going through the CAD link. So today with me, I have Nick Parks, one of our interface project engineers, as well as Elijah Cherney, another interface project engineer. Of course, my name, Todd Lambert, regional trainer. I've also got Mark Wolf with us, another one of our regional trainers. And then lurking in the background, we also have Tom Louis, our business development analyst. And of course, training opportunities. We have the virtual Thursdays, and they are free. It's the first Thursday of every month, 1100 hours Pacific time. Some other options you have, online training. We do have 3-hour blocks. Plus, we can do on-site training, and we customize those trainings to your needs. Some other additional opportunities we have is our regional training academies. The next one coming up, July 16th, 17th, and 18th in San Antonio, Texas. And then following that one, we've got one in Cincinnati, Ohio, July 30th and 31st and August 1st. And then finally, the other one we have on the books right now, New Orleans, September 10th, 11th, and 12th. And of course, if you'd like to sign up for any of those regional training academies, if you'll go to https://emergencyreporting.eventbrite.com, you'll be able to log into those, sign up for them, and get your tickets. Of course, if you have any other questions, you need to reach out to a sales rep or anyone else, feel free to go to our homepage at emergencyreporting.com. You can also find out more information about your training opportunities and the RTAs if you'll hover over customer successes, go to training and learning center, and then you can also, again, find out about our regional training academies. Another additional resource, always feel free, send an email to training@emergencyreporting.com. and someone from training will reach out to you and see if we can help you out. With that said, I am going to turn presentation over to Nick and let Nick take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd. All right.
All right, you have the screen, Nick.
Beautiful. It should show up here in just a second. Let me know if you're seeing it. I think we're perfect. Okay. So yes, I'm Nick Parks here. I'm one of the interface project engineers that works on the CAD links. We work with the automatic data import that comes from CAD and the dispatch center, so that way it automatically fills in your incident reports for you. So let's go ahead and get started. So what exactly is CAD? Well, CAD is computer-aided dispatch. They're primarily responsible for dispatching emergency services such as fire, police, and EMS. So they're kind of like the central hub for communication. Because all this data is being sent through computers, it has the ability to log all this call data. And then because of that, we have the potential to, of course, pick up that call data or have them send it to other third-party vendors, us being one of them. So how do we do the importing of CAD data? Well, there's kind of two main processes. The first one being a flat file parser. So this is where dispatch would send off a text or an XML file to our SFTP server that we have configured. From there, one of our engineers, including myself, will then develop around that XML or text file so that it would import into our CAD API and produce an incident report that you would, of course, fill up by hand, manually. And so that way you would have a full-fledged report kind of based around what is going to work for you guys. So, for example, we may not always have the proper NFIRS codes being mapped. So if you feel like a 321 call may not be an exact 321 call, we, of course, can develop around that, so it may not always result in that. So as I said before, that's kind of one of the pros. We can make these quick modifications. We don't have to reach out to a vendor. There's a lot less processing time when it comes to those. The other benefit is that we also store these local files for up to about 2 months. So if we have to reprocess anything or find a bug, it's a little bit easier than rather having to reach out to dispatch as well as the vendor to produce the file. The drawback to these flat file parsers, though, is it is a little bit slower than the other process that we do, which is considered a web service direct. It's having to bounce through a couple different servers and a couple different processes, so it can take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes for it to fully import into your account. And because of that, it also has a few more points of failure. So yeah, now moving on to the other method, which is the web services direct method that we use. This is basically where the vendor, and this could be such as like Spillman, Hexagon, CIS, whoever the main primary CAD vendor is at your dispatch center, would produce an export that would be built around our CAD API. So with that said, there's no physical file that gets passed to our SFTP server. And because of that, the import actually takes a little bit quicker. So that's one of the benefits of these web service links is they're about a 1 to 2 minute process rather than the 2 to 5 minute process. Now, the drawback with these web service links is that because we're all relying on the vendor, any sort of changes or if, for example, if data is not coming in the way we like, we'd have to reach out to the vendor and then provide them with a work a work order, if you will. So that way they would then get an engineer on board and potentially, of course, have to charge for these changes. Whereas us, if we have the file locally and it's a quick change, it's usually a day or two process, and we don't have to charge for it either. So continuing on with the CAD imports. Now, of course, like I said, we have the flat file parser and we have the web service direct. Now, kind of a subcategory of that is we also have these calls coming in real time and in piecemeal. So we kind of call it like piecemeal versus closed call reports. So piecemeal is where a CAD will send out an updated file for every, let's say, trigger, if you will. So if it's a dispatch, an en route, or an on-scene time that is set up as a trigger, it'll push out a file that will then update into the report, and you can see that live time. The other one, like I said, is a closed call report. There is one drawback that we have seen to this one, and that's, for example, if a medic or a law enforcement unit is on these calls, sometimes they do take a while to finalize and close out the reports. So based on how the export is configured, we may not get that file for that report until they close out their reports themselves. So one thing to kind of keep in mind. So with that said, because we have these files coming in, and they could come in either at end of call or they could come through as the call is ongoing, we have the ability to update the instance in live time. So for example, if we get a call that comes through with an address that may not be correct initially, if they send a updated report with the new address, it should be reflected within ER. This also kind of ties into the ability to reprocess missing calls too. So if there's any sort of backfilling that we need to do, as long as we can obtain the files and they're the same structure that we developed around, we should be able to backfill calls as well. So the benefit of having all this, though, is that because computers are automating everything, there's less chance or it's less prone to human error. So if you're looking for at least more accurate times, less information is going to be, sorry, I'm blanking here. So basically, yeah, if we have this data coming in via CAD, we've come across a lot where firefighters will input times that aren't going to be up to par. So for example, they're going to skip over the seconds, and it's not always necessarily every fire department, but we have noticed that because of this, reports are a little bit askew. So sometimes you may get reports back for turnout times. It could be a couple of minutes off, and then eventually over time, that'll build up to a few hours. So because CAD is kind of dealing with all of this, we take that variable out of the equation. So with CAD also importing, we've also noticed it's taken, I think, about 5 to 10 minutes off of filling out reports. And actually, I'm going to go over this here in a moment, too, to kind of show the time to manually fill out a report in comparison to a CAD import. But how does this kind of work overall? So this right here is a diagram of our kind of system overview. On the left, and here, I'll see if I can get a laser pointer up for you. On the left right here, this is the dispatch environment. So essentially, we'll reach out to a dispatch center and produce a client to watch a folder, and this is for the FFP. So we'll watch a folder, and anytime a file is dropped, we'll then push it outbound into one of our servers. It'll sit there temporarily until we have our service through a Microsoft Azure Logic Apps pick up that file and then process it down into your ER account in here. The other option that we have is the web service direct. So this is where we have the vendor produce an export directly for our API, where they push it out. We don't receive the file into our server or our environment until it hits your account. So like I said, that's the one where it's a little bit more seamless. It takes a 1 to 2 minute process instead of having to bounce through all these different points. So some of the example vendors we worked with, Spillman Motorola, CIS, Central Square, so on and so forth. And then next to them, you can see the different types of links that they usually will provide. So Spillman being a web service, CAS, FFP, so on and so forth. Now, we have worked with a few custom exports as well. Sometimes we can work with an email export or a text export. It just depends on how the data is structured and if we can kind of marry up times to, let's say, unit IDs and so forth. So here's a few of our statistics. Right now, we currently have 2,200, 2,300 CAD accounts. And these are all different separate fire departments that are importing CAD data. So as of right now, I think between February 1st and the end of April, we have up to about 7.7 million CAD submissions. And those, I think, equate up to, about 120 different incidents. So you're looking at about 66 submissions per incident. You can see some of the higher rollers up here. So, for example, Orange County has had about 4,600 incidents so far this year. All right, so moving on to the demo. So let me go ahead and switch gears here. I'm actually going to pull down the slideshow and I'll pull up a demo account that we have set up.
Hey, Nick, if you'll hold on a second, Randy Wells is saying he can't see the content. Randy, can you give us a little bit more information what you mean by that? Black screen. Does anyone else have any issues? Because I'm seeing exactly what Nick is putting out. Is anyone else not seeing?
No, it's Mark. I am not experiencing any issues at all.
Yeah, it looks like it might just be you, Randy, and I'm not sure how to help you with that.
Randy, go ahead and exit out of the meeting and then join back in and see if that does it. Give that a shot.
All right, Nick, go ahead.
All right, so I think this is the proper account. Let me make sure here. Yeah, just up here, CAD test of 5483. Yep, I was going to be wrong. 483. All right, should be logging in just a second here. Okay, so this is our test account. I'm going to go ahead and do a mock run of an incident. So I'm going to generate a new report. And I'm going to basically fill in everything that would be required for NFIRS standards to be able to export to the state. So station, I'm just going to set as station 1, just simple. Date, we'll use today's date. Incident number, I'm going to set as next ID. So what the next ID is going to do is it's going to check based upon all the calls that you received for the year of 2019 and input, of course, the next ID. So, of course, if I made a new report after this, the next one will be 766. One thing to notate with this, though, is if I went and I applied this to be 765 and I made a new report after this and I set it to be 900, the next report would then be 901. So it always checks back on the highest value that it can find for that year. Now, dispatch number is not necessary when you're doing these manual reports, but with CAD, the dispatch number is the serial number for that call. So whenever we do updates or imports, it'll always check to see if the dispatch number is provided. And then if it is provided and it has a report in ER that matches, it'll try to update that report. If it's in a complete or reviewed status, it'll skip it. But if it's an incomplete, it'll try to update. And if it is completely different or there's a character off, it'll also then make a new report and, of course, apply whatever was sent within the payload. So if it had an incident number, it'll apply it. And if not, it'll also do the next ID. Next thing we can also import is going to be the incident type. I'm just going to do a 321 here because it's easy. And then, of course, there's no mutual aid given or hazmat. So next, basic info 2. Patient care reports, PCRs, we're heard of this incident, no. There's no fire service casualties, and no, I wish to record information about these people involved. So the next basic 3, I'm sure we've all seen, is just the standard location information. I'm going to go ahead and just input our address here. Let's see, I think if I type in Rimland, there it is. Perfect. And I forget, Todd, do you remember what portion allows the automatic filling? When you start typing out your address, I can't remember.
Yeah, if you put an address number there, so if you put in the number, the 2200 for the office, and hit the diskette up in the upper corner, it'll populate your lat long for you.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, let's do this.
And that pick list for the street that Nick put in, that comes from the master street list.
That's okay. That's what it was. The master street list. Okay. So I'll just do this again. Perfect. So I know latitude longitude is not necessary right now, but it can always be imported. Property use, I think we set to 150 when we're doing a test on this. And like I said, you can always hit the list and run through whatever property use code you think would apply. Location type, forgot that one. It's not going to let me go until I fill it. There we go. It's a street address. Perfect. Next, so now I have the first 3 boxes green, letting me know that they're complete. We're going to go ahead and add an apparatus. I'll only do one this time, so we'll do, I think we set engine 1 with today's date. We're going to fill them all through. And like I said, all the red ones are mandatory. Everything else is just optional. For times, we'll just say 10 o'clock as an alarm time, 10 o'clock with 1 second, dispatch, 10:02, say 10:05, and in service date, we can do the same thing, 10:05. Perfect. So that should fulfill at least the times. The last thing we'll need to do is add a personnel to the unit as well. I'm going to go ahead and add myself. So now I'm on the unit and save. Let's go ahead and back out. Oh, response mode. That's the last thing I forgot, of course. So as you can see, it does take a little bit to fill out these reports, especially if you have multiple units on a call. So that's basic 4 completed. Basic 5. Let's move on to here. I think there's only a few options. So overall, as you can see, it takes about 5 or 10 minutes to fill out a report, and depending on how many units on it and depending on what type of call it is, could take even longer. We're going to say no, it wasn't a mass casualty event. It's just a 911 response. It was abdominal pain, and I think primary action we set to 31. So save. Perfect. So now this is a complete report. I can authorize and, of course, complete and send off to the state. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I'm going to do it via a CAD import. And it's going to pretty much show the exact same info, maybe a few other pieces that are additional, and then just show you the time difference. So I'm going to send that over right now. Okay, so that should be processing by our API. What I usually recommend is after it hits our API to wait about 5 or 10 seconds, if so, and then refresh the page. There should be a new one here any second. And refresh. There it is. Okay, so I set it up as a dispatch number of demo, so it imports, but it should have pretty much the same information. I forgot to add in the address number, but we can run through it as well. So in here, it imported that station 1 was on the call, today's date, and then it uses the next ID since we didn't pass an agency run number. There will be, like I said, a dispatch number always filled in whenever it comes in from CAD because it is always required in order for it to either update a call or generate a new one. This one did also fill in the 321 medic call, but like I said, this can potentially be optional. I know that not every time a 321 can fulfill the needs of NFIRS. So I believe I was working with a station that had a potential like bomb threat, but the only NFIRS codes that were actually in the list was an explosion. There wasn't actually an alarm for a bomb or anything of the sort. So sometimes it may be a little finicky to work with. But unfortunately, that's all based around NFIRS. Other than that, though, it pretty much pulled in the same information. Address came through, property use. Same thing with the apparatuses. So we have all their times filled in, and these can be updated or changed depending on what's in the file. One thing to notate is that it'll always use the earliest time. So for example, if they send an alarm time as 4:15 and then they send an updated alarm time of 4:14, it'll then update to 4:14. But if they send 4:16 after and the original one was 4:15, it'll remain 4:15. So one thing to kind of notate there. Other than that, we'll head on into the apparatus. It has the ability to also import the response mode, all the times, and then of course any sort of personnel that were on it. And this pulls from the daily roster. And I can show you that here in a bit too. Let's see. So the narrative, we also can import that from CAD. I just imported a lorem ipsum just to kind of fill here. But any sort of CAD notes that are sent in the file, we can capture and of course import into here as well. I think there was one that was missed in here. Oh yeah, this types of service. So 911 response, abdominal pain, and then it imported the primary action. So these are the only two that it couldn't import. So go ahead and save. But that should be pretty much the entire call closed as the manual one was. So definitely can save you some time, and depending on incidents and how many trucks are, it can save you a lot of time. So like I said, there's a lot to kind of overview here too. With the mapping, we have the administration module, and this is where I was saying, for example, if you have some incident types that you don't always think are going to necessarily be like a 311 or a 321, you can determine it in here. So if we send across these codes right here, and these are the ones that come from CAD. So let's say they send across 01 structure in the file. You can of course hit edit and do the NFIRS drop down to whatever NFIRS code you think would fit the situation. And if you feel like none of these would apply, you can leave it blank and it'll leave the incident type box blank in your report. This also applies for any sort of apparatus that we have as well. So the way the apparatuses are imported is the first thing it'll do is it'll check your IDs. So all of these right here are the ones that it'll look at the API, and when it processes the XML payload, it'll see if the CAD code matches one of these, and if so, it'll import the unit. If it doesn't see any of these values in the list, what it'll do is it'll pop it into this apparatus mapping list. So you'll get all these CAD values in here, and then this is where you can determine if you want to have this unit imported into a call or not, based on the mapping that we would do here. So there's a lot of customization that you can do with each of these CAD imports, but like I said, it's a lot to take in. So how do we kind of manage this, right? Let me swap back on over to the slide. Current slide. So
hey,
the main
real quick while you're doing that, I got a question from Jeremy. Says, does Rapid Deploy work with the CAD add-on for ER?
Rapid Deploy, I'm not too familiar with it.
I'm not either.
Yeah, is there a little more info? Is it like an export or a vendor?
Jeremy, can you give us some more information? Go ahead and continue, Nick, and I'll see what I get from Jeremy.
Yeah, I'll see if Elijah can hop on that. So how do we support all this? Well, primarily we use Zendesk, and that's our main support ticket system. From there, we have an on-call engineer, 24/7 pretty much, except for the few late hours of the night Pacific time. So we have about a 1 hour turnaround time. So there should be a link, I believe, on our support page that will then prompt you with a number that you can call. It'll basically produce a ticket that'll ping our on-call phone, and we usually are able to hop on roughly within an hour and try to resolve the issue. All of this is also run through Microsoft Azure's platform, which has about a 99.9% uptime, according to them. I've probably run into 3 major outages over the past 2 or 3 years that I've been working with it, so I can vouch for the 99% uptime. It's been really, really good, as well as their support has been really good at responding to us and making sure that all of our needs are being taken care of. Other than that, we also have our on-call support representatives, and these are the standard ones that you would talk to about your standard reports, but they can also answer a few CAD questions, and if not, they will send it off to us, and we have our own CAD support queue as well. So where do you start? How do you know if you're going to be wanting to do FFP or a web service? Well, the first thing is, contact your sales rep. What they'll do is they'll provide you a survey link for your dispatch to complete, or yourself if you know the information. After that survey is received by ER, one of us, whether it's me, Elijah, or Tony, will pick it up, examine, and get with dispatch or the vendor to determine if the link is viable or not. After we determine if it's viable, we'll go ahead and just start producing it. Most of the time, we have a lot of templates built out. So if it's an add-on agency or anything of the sort, usually a quick turnaround time. If it's a new vendor or new export that we have to build around, can take a little bit longer. I think those turnaround times are about 2 to 3 months, depending on what type of link we're doing. After that, after we've of course established a full service that can read these files and process them properly, we'll reach back out to the fire department or whoever is administering the ER account for any sort of testing training, and then the mapping that we went over earlier. And then after that, determine go live and setting up for auto import. Same thing with web service, pretty much the same process, contacting sales rep and getting your dispatch center or yourself to complete the survey. And after we receive the survey and determine it's viable, we'll then provide what we consider an agency identifier code. These are the things that we would put into the payload when we do the FFPs, and that determines which account gets the data. But because the vendor is producing an export for our API directly, we just provide the code, and that determines who gets the information. So same thing after that, we'll then reach back out to the fire department or whoever the requesting agency administrator is to go over any sort of testing and training, and then determine a go live date for auto import. So I have here's the 3 guys that we're running. I got Tony, myself, and Elijah, and then the contact page for your sales rep, and then more information on the CAD interface too. All right, that pretty much sums up the demo for CAD. If there are additional questions, yeah, you can definitely ask them here, and I can pop back into the demo account too and run some tests if there are any that you want to try out.
Nick, I think we've got most questions. We do have one that just popped in from Kevin. It says, for FFP, is there a limitation on data that can be exported from a CAD? I'm thinking CAD vendor.
I want to say CAD vendor.
Logicsys.
Yeah, so it kind of depends. The best way that I like to say with these CAD links is we're kind of like a catcher's mitt. So whatever they can kind of throw at us, for the most part, we can capture and then import into your account. So if you're kind of concerned about maybe like narrative information, as long as Logicsys can capture those notes and include it in the file, for the most part, we should be able to import. So we're kind of, unfortunately, at the will and whim of vendors most of the time.
And then Doug just put in, we have signed a contract with Spillman and will migrate later this year. At what point should we start the process of establishing the CAD link?
Ooh, that is a good question. I would say probably as soon as you can. If we don't have a ticket already, and actually, let's see who put in that question. I can see if we already have a ticket. But essentially, that'd be Doug Hogan. Okay, let's see, Doug. I can see if I have something open for you already. But yeah, the sooner that the sooner that we can find out about these migrations is going to be better for us, because we can start lining up projects to, I guess, make room for these migrations. For example, I had one earlier this month with Okaloosa County. They did a migration from one vendor to another, but because they informed us weeks prior, it was a little more smooth than just having to do it the same day and develop around the export. But the nice thing too is with Spillman, since it is a web service, most likely all we'll have to do is just provide an agency identifier code. So there shouldn't be too much development on our side.
And then Chris Bowen has asked, have you ever worked with Symposium CAD?
I personally haven't, but I believe Elijah has. So I think it's one of the newer vendors we've worked with. But I think it's something that has worked out for us. Yeah, we have a few of them. Yeah, looks like it is something we have worked with.
Yep, and just to bring you back up to speed, that question we asked earlier about rapid deploy, Jeremy had said it's a new AT&T web browser or web-based dispatch. Of course, Elijah and I both answered that it would depend on whether they could work with the API and the 2 export types that you explained in the beginning of the broadcast.
Yeah. So it depends if they can write to our API or if they're going to be sending us a file. But if you can provide, some contact information, we have no problem reaching out and kind of figuring out how they're configured and if they can work with us.
All right, now we're getting all kinds of questions. Sean wants to know if we have any agency in the county that also uses ER, can I enter their CAD info so it autofills their apparatus into our report for mutual aid? And I believe the answer to that is yes. If you have those apparatus mapped in your apparatus mapping and it's coming from the same county dispatch, it will map them in your incident module for you for mutual aid.
Correct. Yeah, let's see. I'm just running through. Which one was that one again?
That was Sean Dillon.
Sean Dillon. Yes. Okay. Sean. So yeah, you could fill in their apparatus. If they also have ER, I personally recommend using it's referred to as agency friends. And let me see if I can find that real quick for us.
Okay.
In the slideshow. So the reason I prefer agency friends is because it allows you to import other apparatuses and their times without also having affect your reports. So let's see, agency friends, I think they are right here. So agencies that can access our data. So from here, you can add in an agency. So here's their name, FDID, ESM ID, and then the state that they're in. And then you can provide what access that they have. So they would have to do the same thing for you. They go to the agency friends, which ones can access my data or that we have access to. So for example, here's all the ones that we have access to. And if they go on a call and it has the incident data that matches this account's incident data, it would then import the unit information below your units, but it won't affect your reportings, if you will. So your turnout times won't be affected by other mutual aid calls.
Hey, Nick, Mark Wolf, can I jump in and also give some more information on that particular topic there? We do have a couple of reports that will pull data from the agency friends. If both agencies are set up to share data with one another, their keyword search in the reports module is geospatial. And there's two of them out there that will bring in their vehicles, their apparatus, their response times, and the number of their personnel into those two reports. And that would help you out when they're you're a customer, you have them set up as you're a friend, then you don't have to add their apparatus into your apparatus list and deal with that kind of stuff, because like Nick was saying before, that can greatly affect your response time data when you're pulling it.
And then Sean, so we have them listed in that area, but the times and do not currently autofill. So Sean, let me get with you after this and see how your account is configured and see if we can resolve that.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Jeremy has a good question here that I'm not sure about, Nick. It says we get advised of road closings by the county dispatch center and attaches our apparatus. Is there a way to prevent it from creating a report?
Yeah, so we can try to figure out if the incident type, so basically what we'd have to do is, depending if it's an FFP or a web service, we'd either have to get with the vendor or look at the file and determine if there's something in there that we can, I guess, utilize as a trigger, right? So if they're going to import in the file, let's say an identifier that says, oh yeah, this is a road closing call or something of the sort, we can say to ignore all of those calls altogether. And that way it won't import into your account. But we'll have to find, some sort of identifier within the file that would designate those type of calls. But yes, it can be done, potentially.
Awesome.
Hey, Nick, it's Tom. I've got one question that I know I get asked a lot of when I'm on site with the customers and prospects is, how many nodes or endpoints do we have that basically if the CAD's pitching it, we can receive it and catch it?
The exact number, I do not know off the top of my head. I would say probably a few hundred. Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact number, but it's definitely a few hundred.
Yeah, no, ballpark's fine.
Last question it looks like we got here, Nick, from Kevin Baker. It says, on agency friends, does that map call information based on CAD incident number?
Ooh, map call information. Let's see. That I actually don't know off the top of my head. I might have to do a little more research on that one.
Guys, I think that answer is it's tied into the aid given and aid received, not by the CAD incident number.
That's what I was thinking myself, but I wasn't.
It's not the CAD number. It's tied in. If you give aid and select that was the incident you gave aid to, that's how it links it in the geospatial reports.
Right. You have to, like Tom is correct, you have to link it in on the basic info 5 page using agency friends for that to autofill in there. Sean, I'm going to jump in here too. You've asked a question here. I want you to send me your department name and your account ID number to my email address, and I'll be able to help you out with that. That's to Sean Dillon.
Yeah, I'm gonna notate. I'm probably gonna get with Sean as well later today and see if I can look into his import. Perfect. Okay, is there any other questions that have popped up that I've missed? I think we've got them all so far.
Top one, how does the CAD link work if you are also receiving data from another vendor such as ESO, which also creates runs in your system?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So as I was stating before, when we receive these CAD imports, it always has to have a dispatch number. So if we can have those two vendors were to, I guess, produce a payload or a file that would have those dispatch numbers match and be the same, then we can have, I guess, those two exports fill into a single incident report rather than having duplicates. But it is all based around that dispatch number and if it can be provided. Now, it doesn't necessarily always have to be a dispatch number either. We kind of assign that it's going to fill into that box, so we can always use a case number or any sort of other kind of run number, if you will. And if they match between the two files from the two vendors, then we can always have them, like I said, import into the same report. But if not, then yeah, you will get duplicates.
Excellent.
So Nick and the interface team, one thing I get asked a lot too, this is Tom again, and I give them certain advice and I'm curious your thoughts. What's your recommendations on having the CAD go ahead and populate not the dispatch number, but the incident number versus letting it just sequentially add a +1 each time a call comes over? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it depends on, I would say, it depends on what you want to have that number kind of resemble. Some agencies that I've come across want to have the run number show how many runs they've done on that year, in which case I usually recommend ER to do the autofill kind of next ID, if you will, so you can kind of have an exact amount of calls you've been on. But if you want to have that run number correlate to something you can refer to with dispatch, then we'll usually pull it over from the file. So for example, that might be where it jumps around from, run 301, and then, for example, if you don't go on 302, 303, or 304 because your units weren't assigned, the next one might come in at 305. So it does depend on what the agency desires that number to be and represent, and that's where we kind of tie in the more custom exports and CAD imports.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I usually advise them that the best practice would be is if your CAD has a unique dispatch number for all the agencies they dispatch for, and that your agency gets its own unique incident number. That's the best way to go if you have that luxury. Sometimes having the incident number auto-populate by the next ID, what happens is if someone manually puts in a call and then a call comes in from the CAD, your sequence can get thrown off. So just a heads up on that, just from some experience I've encountered out there in the field.
Yeah.
All right, any last minute questions from anyone out there? Not seeing anything. Nick, Elijah, thank you guys for being here. You're definitely speaking over our trainers' heads. We kind of understand how the CAD stuff works and where it goes in the system, but how it gets there, that's something that I just learned today, basically.
Well, I hope I described it in a way that made sense. I know it's a lot to take in, but hopefully I made it a little more simple. Oh, I do see one other question.
Jeff just put
Jeffrey
a question.
Beazle. Let's see.
There's
We do not provide EMS services. We are just a fire department service. Is it going to create an incident for every EMS call that is in our response area, or will it only create an incident where we are dispatched to? Actually, I worked on something similar to this earlier. I had a fire agency that was getting calls when only one of their EMS units went on it, but not one of their fire, and they only wanted to have when a fire unit was attached. So if we do what we consider, like I said, the flat file parser method, so the FFPs, and we receive a file, we can produce what we consider like a unit list as a trigger. So only if one of your fire units is on the call will it then import into your account. And like I said, that's what we can do with an FFP link. If it's a web service link, we'd have to reach out to the vendor and see if they can filter out those EMS calls for you.
Jeff says they're in Lorenz County, PA, using Tritech.
Legion using. Okay, so if you're using Tritech, I believe you're a flat file. So in most cases, it should be a unit filter that we can apply. In fact, let me pull up the current code that we have for Luzerne, and I will let you know what we have in place. 2 seconds here. Interfaces, PA, and Luzerne. Jeff, do you know off the top of your head, so I know Luzerne has, I think like a department number for each one. So for example, I have like 112, 116, 184. Do you know which one is yours? 251. Okay. Oh, it looks like we don't have you yet, but you can always add you in. But looking at the other Luzerne parsers, I think we look for a unit ID, and if the unit ID contains a 241 value, then it will submit into your account, or in your case, a 251 value. So it might be a little different for the EMS stuff, so I'd have to kind of examine what, I guess, characters are sending over for those units, but it looks like it can be potentially implemented since we're getting a actual physical file.
Yeah, I can just say from my experience working with Nick and Elijah and Tony when I'm out on sites, these guys are wizards on the backside making the CAD sing. So.
Great job, Nick and Elijah. Thanks for today.
Yeah. No worries. Ken, let's see. Can you go over again on how to ensure that our calls are sequential? We are having our problems with calls getting hung up. So I'd have to see kind of how your account is configured, but in order for the calls to be sequential, we basically have to make sure that either one, if it's an import coming from CAD, that each import that's coming through has a sequential listing for your case number. And if there isn't a case number, we would then just apply the ER, I guess, next ID, if you will. And then if you're still getting kind of run numbers out of, I guess, sequence at that point, we might have to go through your account and figure out, well, where's the call that's producing, this extreme case number or whatever it may be. So let me get with you on that one actually later today if you have time, Ken.
All right. Any other questions out there? Well, seeing none. Again, Nick, Elijah, Mark, Tom, thanks for joining us all on this. I think this was a good virtual Thursday.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Nick did an excellent job.
Perfect, thank you, yeah. And like I said, yeah, if you have any questions with CAD or anything of the sort, feel free to reach out via support, email, you name it. We're always happy to hop on and answer any questions you guys have or resolve any troubles you're running into.
Well, thank you, everybody. And we hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there.
Stay safe. Take care.